Okay, and welcome. This year we are going to try something different with my blog. We're actually going to continue the theme of Meet the Innovators, where I've set myself the challenge of interviewing 50 edu innovators from around the world, but I'm going to have a particularly Australiana feel to it and share some of the awesome voices that are coming out of my beautiful country, Australia. And the very first person that I'd like to invite to step up to the plate and have a conversation with me this year is my good friend, Allan Carrington. G'day, Allan. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Brett, and thank you. And it's almost Australia Day, so we could start the interview with lamb chops.
We should. Big fan. Anyone who doesn't know, Sam Kekovich, and make sure you go and YouTube that when you finish this, and the Australia Day YouTube videos.
Yeah. It's good to be here, and I'm very, very honoured that I'm first in 2016. So over to you.
No, well, thank you. I was actually wondering. I know a lot about you, and I've followed your work for some time now. And if I have a little sneaky look over that funny circle, coloured-in circle shape that you have just over you, that's right, pointing perfectly to it for me. I know what that is, but I might ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about that circle shape that you have hiding behind your shoulder.
Well, where do I start? I've been, up to 3 years ago, I was a learning designer with the University of Adelaide. I've been down in Adelaide for 10 years. I've worked for the University of Adelaide in the Centre for Learning and Professional Development, and I've been a learning designer all that time. So my role in a higher education environment is to come alongside the academics and help them to integrate technology into their teaching. I've been pretty good at it. I can say that without boasting because I've got some rather significant awards for the effort. But I was I was fortunate enough to be given a seat. I mean, we had about 600 people for 250 seats or something. But Apple in 2012, they invited me to across to Cork Island. And I do a thing called a university, or used to call it, still do actually, a university crawl, a bit like a pub crawl, okay, for us Aussies. And so when I go to a place like Ireland, I set up seminars before and after. Cut a long story short, I had 8 seminars at 5 universities in 3 countries set up for that trip. And everybody wanted me to talk iPads. And so I was running a seminar, or a teaching seminar on pedagogy. I called it pedagogy. I come up with this crazy word, and it really fitted because it was an iPad learning and teaching, how to use them for learning and teaching. So I had a pedagogy 101 and a pedagogy 201. So I thought I better make sure I've got my resources and my visuals up to date. And Brett, particularly I'm sure you've met it as well, is that there are so many times when you sit and talk to teachers where the teacher has got the horse before the cart, and they have talked about the technology driving the pedagogy and not the other way around. And for years I've been trying to work out the most powerful way to get across to teachers that the pedagogy's got to drive the technology, okay? And so I was thinking along those lines, and of course I started to want to talk about what is good pedagogy, what is good teaching practice. And of course I stumbled upon Bloom's taxonomy. Not stumbled, I went back to Bloom's taxonomy, right? And if you're a teacher, everybody knows about Bloom's taxonomy. And even though it's not fully integrated into higher educational methodology, they certainly know it. So I was thinking Bloom's taxonomy, and I thought to myself, here's a process where they can start to develop their pedagogy. And as you know, the wheel version of it goes from the center outwards. And I thought to myself, well, when we get out to the edge of it, you're talking about activities designed, right, in the original taxonomy. I thought, what about if we put apps on the outside of it and categorize those apps according to their Bloom's cognitive domain category, you know, like remembering, understanding, etc. as he goes up that taxonomy. And so I put the apps around the side. I thought, this is a very cool visual. I put it in a PowerPoint, keynote presentation, and went across to the UK. I think it was the University of Edinburgh where the penny really dropped, because every time I showed this thing in these pedagogy workshops, everybody ran to me and said, can we use it? Can we please use it? And I got sort of swamped. And I thought to myself, there's something here. So I come back and I started to think it and develop it. And that wheel there is called the pedagogy wheel, which the jokes about it being pedagogy and not pedagogy have stopped, because pedagogy has almost been accepted as a word like wiki. You know, not quite as good as wiki yet, but I called it the pedagogy wheel. It's now up to version 4, right? 4.1, and it got more complicated, not complicated, more comprehensive and bigger picture as the time went on. And I developed that poster in English, and that English poster has been downloaded 150,000 times off my blog site in the last 18 months.
That's phenomenal, isn't it? That's just for a way for teachers, just that number replicates. So yeah, I'm stuck here, but what I want to say is that just shows the amount of spread of desire to grab the idea and run with it is just something that obviously it's to you, but I think you hit something right at the right moment and right at the right time that teachers needed something.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, I've been talking and live in Padagogy wheel now for the last 3 years, and I retired 3 years ago. Retired, right? I've never worked so hard, had so much fun, reached so many people in all my life. I just couldn't go back to the university now because I'm too busy. No money, I might add, my friend. Money, but that's not the issue. Right? The issue is that if you're working for money, change jobs, okay? But here's the story. We are literally, this thing really scratches where teachers itch. And the whole idea of it was for a visual to be in their face at the coal face, right? And that's why Matt Harris, who's the president of the International Society for Technology and Education, ISTE, he's the president of the board of directors, and he sent me a video, a tweet one day, and said the pedagogy wheel should be in every classroom in the world. And so I went back to him and said, "You serious?" So that was my first question. He said, "Yes, I am serious." I said, "Well, can you give me more?" And he came back with the most magic endorsement, which you've probably seen. If not, I can show it to you later. But he said this thing, and that sent me on another journey. And that journey was, why should it only be in English? And, you know, if it's going to go into every classroom in the world, then there's this other hypothesis, which I'd love to do a podcast, and actually I'd love to do some sort of interaction with other teachers on this at this level, is here's my hypothesis, all right? And this is what I said to them in China a couple of months ago. My hypothesis is that every person thinks more creatively and more higher order, in a higher order thinking in their heart language or first language than they do in any other. I said, so if you want a person to be creative and innovative and they speak Chinese, give them resources to work in Chinese. Don't expect them to translate them into English.
That's a very common sense approach, that.
And so I started translating them. Well, last weekend I published wheel number 6, or language number 6, and that was Arabic. Would you believe it? Arabic. So we've now got it in English, Spanish, German, Chinese, Norwegian, and Arabic. And I'm working on Russian, Catalan, French, Dutch, to name a few. And then there's about, there's a total of 21 being translated. We hope to have in wheels out by the end of the year.
Now, look, I think one of the real big
That's,
reasons behind the success too, I was going to say, is that what you've done is we all talk a lot in education about uh, pedagogy needs to come before technology, and we can say that, we can rattle it off, and we can say it till we're blue in the faces. But what you were able to do is to very succinctly create a resource or a framework that people can see that actually you can apply to your work, and you've got the technology there, but it is built upon a pedagogical practice, and a pedagogical practice that's universally accepted, something really common like Bloom's. And it's so we all automatically have this affinity for what you've got, yet in a really user-friendly framework. And I think that just struck a chord with people globally.
I reckon it did. Some did, something based on the stats. But here's an interesting thing. You see, when the teacher first discovers it, they go, "Oh, 124 apps. Wow, cool. Never seen that before." Oh, hang on, they're categorized according to cognitive domain. So these ones over here are strong on creating. These ones over here are strong on remembering, right? That's mind-blowing in itself, right? But I have to keep telling everybody, it's not about the apps. It's not about the apps. So I would just walk out from the center of the wheel quickly for the people who are watching this, right? Version 1 was literally the taxonomy with apps around it. There were 62 of them around the outside. That went ballistic. Okay. Then I decided, I don't remember how this all happened, but a lot of it come out of guys like you talking to me and saying, "What about?" And I know the question of motivation would come from a mate in America, but I first then put in the center of it, what is the actual core of teaching? What is the center piece in teaching? And the centerpiece in teaching is transformation, right? And everybody wants to be a transformative teacher or empower the student to transformative learning. But what in the world does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like? Somebody tell me what it is. And so I started to think about that. And of course, that is the whole movement across higher education around the world to do with graduate attributes. By the time, what is a graduate going to look like, feel like, think like, be like when they walk out of this program, okay? And there are universities spending gazillions developing their graduate attributes. They want student experience. They want to define, why would you go to the University of Adelaide? Why not go to the University of South Australia? What's the difference? Okay, so they express it in the form of attributes and capabilities. So I put that as the core, and there's a whole, thing on we could talk. Actually, that's almost a day in itself in a seminar. And then you move out to the next thing. What's the next thing you've got to take our head on? And that's motivation. And of course, Dan Pink and all the work he's done with autonomy, mastery, and purpose is a killer. The world of carrot and stick is dead, man. We left that last century, and it didn't work then. So why would it work now? So Dan's work on motivation was the next ring out. And then we went into the taxonomy, and then after I got past the apps, I added SAMR model. Okay, in other words, how do we design? How do we design activities within the technology to make sure that they are redefining stuff and that they're in fact pushing the student into innovation?
It was actually my work with SEMAR that originally actually led me to you. Now, and that's almost worth mentioning in itself. So you mentioned there, and obviously your background is in higher education, in tertiary institutions. Now, I'm a primary school teacher, so I was grappling with how do I work in what was now a one-to-one BYOD device environment. I had all these children who had these new iPads, and I needed to make sure that what I was doing was educationally valid. And not only that, but was better than what I could have done without that device in the room. So it sent me on this search, and that search led me to Samar, and then that Samar search led me to use. Now, I'm going to, and I know some of the answer here, but you've got this beautiful model, and it's making headway around the world. Where to next? What's the next big challenge for Allan Carrington and the pedagogy world?
Well, I call this year the year of application, and China did this to me. You can't go into China and see the enormous potential. It's a parallel universe, Brett, seriously, educational universe. And it's awesome. And these guys turned to me and said, this is amazing. You know, this truly they did. This is amazing. Who is doing what with it? How do we learn it? Show me examples, best practice. Not because they wanted to validate the concept. What they wanted to do is see what other people were doing. So I got 150,000 of these things out there. But do you know you were the first, and your guys in Sydney were the first person to come back to me and said, look, we've done an AR project on this. This is the results, which is staggering. And you know that's on the blog, okay? And please, guys who are watching this, go and read that blog post, and Brett put the links somewhere so that they can go and have a look at what you guys did. I mean, you blew me away because you were the first person. I developed a professional development tool for teachers in higher education, and you guys went and gave it to 12-year-old kids. Go figure, you know.
Great success. And
with great success.
And trackable, like you said, with the AR action research there, with trackable evidence to prove that it was making the difference that we hoped it would.
Yeah, and that's you know, that was been my vision ever since you come back to me with that, and I thought, this is the future. I've got to get more of this stuff, and you know, it doesn't have to be as long as what you guys did, but I'm asking teachers to say, all right, put it to the gun, you know, try it out, see if this works. This whole question of graduate attributes, you know, to give you a quick one on this, I know the time is going to get away because I talk so much about this stuff. You might cut some out, but here is the story. I was looking for some way to create a profile to get the teachers to look at graduate attributes and work with the students. And a guy called Jeff Scott from the University of Western Sydney rocked up to the University of Adelaide a couple of years ago, and while giving a keynote presentation at one of our conferences, he introduced this idea of 15 what he calls employable capabilities. All right, and that was the result of 23 years of research with the bosses. Now, these are the 15 most things, or rather the 15 most wanted things that bosses want out of graduates from a university. These are the things that get them the good jobs. These are the difference between the average dude and the excellent, okay, performer. And he listed these 15 things. And I put my hand up halfway through it and said, Jeff, 95% of those things are matters of the heart. They're not matters of the head. And remember, this is what the bosses pay for, right? And he laughed and he said, you know, they're almost religious, aren't they? Joke, joke. Then he went on to say, you know what's even really sad? The universities are not addressing them. So I've come up with this idea of using these 15 graduate attributes. I've turned them into 25. And I say to a teacher, please pick 5, develop a profile, talk to your student about it, develop a consensus, then set up a learning contract. And I'll tell you this, Brett, I'm, as your teacher, for the next 12 weeks of this course, I'll work 24/7 to get you to look like that. We just defined it on one condition. And of course you will say, what's that? And I say that you work 24/7 to get there. And so now the student has got a picture an articulated model of excellence that come out the other end. It's not perfect, but it's far better than nothing.
That's right.
So that's the core and motivation, and that's it. So I want teachers to go out and put this to the test. That's the future. That's this year, as well as there's more development we can do with databases and apps and applications and all sorts of stuff. But right now, I'm looking for best practice and research.
So that's the challenge, isn't it, to all of our friends here who do watch this video, and I'll certainly help champion through my PLN network on Aussie Ed, and
Appreciate
a way
that.
to help you, but not only help you, but have teachers utilize this program, it's not a program, but utilizing this methodology, but actually being able to do a little bit of research and see the difference that it does make, and create a collective of best practice.
Yeah, that's if I can gather that, I can go back into China, and I know that I'll have an endless stream of teachers wanting to use it.
Yeah.
Boggles the brain. But all they want to do,
that helps us as teachers, like you said, go back to transforming. Teachers are good people by nature. Teachers don't just want to help the 30 kids that are in their classroom. Teachers want to make a difference to the world, and things like this, and you reaching out all over the world, this is one way that we actually can help make that little bit of a difference to the
I've been working cross-culturally now for 35 years, and I can tell you what, if you roll back a motivation for being educated, no matter what culture you're in, it doesn't matter what political stance you've got, what religious worldview you've got, you roll it back, and the reasons for going to school or going to be educated, you roll it back to one thing and one thing only. I want to make a difference. I want to change my world. And that is the one thing that if we can show teachers how to help students change their world, we've done our job, and the next generation's got hope.
That's good. That's beautiful, and that's a beautiful way to end this. And I know that you've made a difference directly to my own teaching practice, and I want to say thank you to that. And hopefully, in some small way, this video can maybe help the next teacher along, get a little bit of inspiration as well. So, thank you very much for today.
Thank you. I'm honoured, and let's do this again.
Thank you.